He sat quietly on the edge of the chair, staring down at his hands. "I'm not feeling like myself anymore, Doc." He was in his late 60s, well-dressed, polite, still sharp in many ways. But as he spoke, something in his voice cracked a little. "I walk into a room and forget why I went there. I lose track of my thoughts mid-sentence. I used to be the guy who could outthink anyone. Now I feel lost in my own head." I hear that more than you'd imagine. And yes, part of it is age. The brain does change over time. But what most men and even most doctors don't realize is how deeply your sexual health is tied to your cognitive health. See, when you engage in sexual activity, yes, even masturbation, your brain doesn't just release tension. It releases chemistry, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. These aren't just feel-good hormones. They are maintenance fuel for your mind. Dopamine helps you focus. Oxytocin builds emotional balance and memory. Serotonin calms the storm in your brain. And after climax, when your body is finally allowed to exhale, your cortisol levels, your stress hormone, drop dramatically. That moment, that natural release, is like hitting the reset button. But when that reset never happens, day after day, week after week, your brain begins to drift. It becomes slower, fogged, disconnected. And it doesn't happen overnight. That's the scary part. It starts small. You forget a name. You lose track of the date. Then one day you hesitate to speak up because you're not sure your thoughts are in the right order anymore. You start to doubt your own clarity. And inside that doubt, fear grows. And with fear, isolation. I've seen men retreat from social events, avoid conversations, even stop reading the newspaper, not because they're lazy, but because the mental energy it takes to stay engaged becomes too heavy. And all the while, they blame it on just getting old. But here's what they don't know. They're not broken. They're just chemically starved. You don't need a new brain. You need to reconnect with the one you already have. The one that's waiting for stimulation, balance, rhythm. Now, let's talk about something even more personal. Because when your sexual activity disappears completely, your testosterone levels begin to drop. And testosterone isn't just about libido. It's about your mental drive, your decision-making, your courage, and your core identity as a man. You've probably heard that men with higher testosterone tend to be more focused and assertive. But what's often left out is this. Testosterone is also a cognitive protector, especially in later life. It supports memory, attention, and emotional resilience. So when your sexual habits fade away, your brain and hormones start falling out of sync. And slowly, life starts to feel more like watching from the bleachers instead of being in the game. Now, I'm not saying that quitting masturbation causes dementia or Alzheimer's, but I am saying this. When you deny your brain the stimulation and chemical balance it was built to receive, you make yourself more vulnerable to decline. Your mental edge softens, and eventually your sense of self begins to blur. One of my patients, a retired chess player, told me, "I stopped going to the club. I couldn't concentrate anymore. It wasn't fun. It was exhausting." Another, a former teacher, said, "I wake up feeling blank, like there's a wall between me and the world." These aren't memory issues that need medication. These are signs of disconnection from the body, the mind, and from the rhythm that once kept them fully present. But here's the good news. This can change. Because when the body is reawakened, the brain follows. When you give yourself permission to feel again, your chemistry realigns. The fog lifts, and for the first time in a long time, you remember who you are. And yet, mental fog is only one layer, because when your brain stops firing, your emotions begin to flatten. You don't just lose clarity, you lose joy, you lose motivation, you lose that subtle spark that makes life feel worth living. So now let's go deeper. Because what happens when that emotional rhythm vanishes altogether? Let me tell you the story of a man who didn't feel sadness or happiness or anything at all.
He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes were tired, his skin was pale, and his voice was flat when he said, "Doc, I go to sleep at 10. I wake up at 2, like I was fired from a cannon. And after that, I just lie there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning to come." He was 68, no sleep apnea, no major health issues. His labs looked fine, his diet was decent, he didn't drink too much caffeine or scroll on his phone all night, but he was missing something. Something small, something quiet, something powerful. So I asked him gently, "Have you been intimate with yourself at all? Even just once in a while?" He looked away and mumbled, "That part of me is over." But what he didn't realize was this: that part of him might be exactly what his body had been crying out for. You see, sleep is not just about lying in bed with your eyes closed. It's a biological performance, a hormonal ballet. Your body has to want to sleep, and it needs the right signals to do it. And here's the truth. One of the most natural, reliable signals for deep, restorative sleep is orgasm. When you climax, whether with a partner or alone, your brain releases a cascade of chemicals. Prolactin, which makes you feel drowsy. Oxytocin, which calms the nervous system. Endorphins, which ease the body into rest. And, just as importantly, your stress hormone, cortisol, drops like a stone. Your heart rate slows, your muscles relax, your breathing deepens. You enter the perfect state for real, uninterrupted sleep. Now, imagine going weeks, months, even years without that reset, that drop, that signal. What happens? You toss, you turn, you wake up 3, 4, 5 times a night and can't figure out why. Your body forgot how to turn itself off. Some people start thinking this is normal. It's just aging, they say. But no, it's not normal. It's just neglected biology. Others turn to pills, melatonin, sedatives, prescription sleep aids. But those don't produce natural hormones. They override the system. And over time, they numb you. They don't restore you. But your body already knows how to sleep. It just needs to be reminded. One of my patients, after months of fragmented nights, decided to reconnect with that part of himself he thought was long gone. And I'll never forget what he told me. "Doc, I slept like I was 30 again. I didn't realize how long I'd needed that release. I thought I was just getting old. Turns out, I was just tense." And that's the thing. Most people don't realize how much tension they're holding until they finally let it go. So here's the question I want you to ask yourself tonight. When was the last time your body felt completely relaxed? Not tired, not sedated, but fully, deeply at ease, like your bones could melt into the bed and your brain had nothing left to hold. That's not a luxury. That's your right. That's health. And if you've been lying awake, restless, staring into the dark, blaming your age, your stress, or the clock, maybe it's time to go inward. Maybe the reset you need is already built into you. Now, here's where it gets even more important. Because when sleep breaks down, your body pays the price day and night. Your mood drops, your memory fades, your immunity weakens, and over time, your sense of purpose begins to fade too. But we're not done yet, because there's something that slips in right after poor sleep does. Something more dangerous than restlessness, something that doesn't feel like sadness, but steals your life just the same. Let's talk about the kind of depression that men over 60 rarely recognize until it's too late.
You might not feel sad. You might not cry. And yet, you could still be depressed. That's the truth most men over 60 never hear. Because depression at your age doesn't always show up like it used to. It wears a different mask, and if you don't recognize it, it can quietly start stealing your life from the inside out. One of my patients once told me, "Doc, I don't feel anything anymore. Not joy, not sorrow, just flat." He wasn't sick, he wasn't in pain, he wasn't even aware something was wrong, but he had stopped smiling. He had stopped laughing. He had stopped looking forward to anything. And that's what got my attention. Because in older men, depression rarely looks like sadness. It often shows up as silence, as disinterest, as a quiet withdrawal from life. So I asked him gently, "When was the last time you touched yourself? Not out of lust, but just to feel human again?" He stared at me, confused. "It's been years," he said. "I didn't think it mattered." But it does. It matters more than most men realize. You see, masturbation isn't just physical. It's emotional release. It's the body's built-in way of pushing out tension and letting in peace. During climax, your brain releases powerful mood-regulating chemicals like oxytocin and endorphins. These are not fantasies. They are biological tools designed to keep you stable, chemicals that lift your mood, reduce anxiety, and reconnect you with your own body. When that release disappears, so do those chemicals. And slowly, without realizing it, you start to go numb. Not sad, not angry, just nothing. Maybe you start sleeping more or sleeping less. Maybe food doesn't taste the same. Maybe you stop calling your friends back, or you avoid the mirror because you don't like the man looking back at you. If any of this sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're not alone. And you're not too old to feel again. If you've ever felt like you're running on autopilot, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you haven't, but you're listening closely, type 0. Because either way, I want to hear from you. You see, I've worked with dozens of men who thought they were just getting older, but all they really needed was reconnection. Not with another person, but with themselves. I remember one man, a widower in his early 70s. He hadn't touched himself in over 5 years, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't think he was allowed to, that it was somehow wrong at his age. When I gently explained the biology behind emotional release, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You mean I can still feel like a man?" "Yes," I said. "You always could." And a month later, he returned to my office. Something was different. His voice had more tone. His posture was stronger. He said, "I don't know how to explain it, Doc, but I feel like I'm back inside my body again." So here's what I'll tell you. If you've been living flat, silent, disconnected from the skin you live in, you don't need medication right away. You need permission. Permission to feel, to touch, to care, to come back to life. Start small. 5 quiet minutes before bed.
No expectations. No shame. Just curiosity. Just breath. Just presence. Because depression in older men isn't always darkness. Sometimes it's just distance. And the bridge back to yourself might be as simple as your own two hands. Now here's the next layer. You've heard how this affects your mind, your sleep, your mood, but what happens when your muscles start giving up too? When standing hurts, walking weakens, and your bladder begins to misfire? Let's talk about the foundation beneath all of it, your pelvic floor.
Let me be direct, because no one else will be. What I'm about to say won't come up at your annual checkup. Your doctor probably won't mention it. Your friends definitely won't talk about it. And you might not even admit it to yourself. But here it is. If you've stopped masturbating in your older years, your body may already be shutting down in ways you don't even realize. I'm not talking about fantasy or shame or some locker room talk from your teenage days. I'm talking about biology. Clinical, physiological reality, the kind that affects your prostate, your brain, your hormones, your immune system, and yes, your sense of identity. Because something strange happens when men stop touching their own bodies. They don't just lose a physical habit, they lose sleep. They lose sharpness. They lose energy, mood, bladder control, and worst of all, they begin to lose themselves. And most of them never see it coming. I've spent over 30 years working with men just like you, strong, independent, intelligent men who gradually began to shrink inside their own lives, not because of disease, not because of tragedy, but because they quietly disconnected from the most basic form of self-intimacy. And the ripple effects? They are massive, silent, and completely reversible. So if you're still with me, pause for a second. Comment below and say, I still want to feel alive. Like this video and subscribe, because we're going to talk about the 7 silent losses that happen when a man stops masturbating after 60, and how reclaiming this one private habit could restore everything from your sleep and memory to your dignity and drive. This isn't about going back in time. This is about coming back to life. Now, let's begin with the one body part that almost every man ignores until it's too late, the prostate.
Let me tell you a story. He was 73, smart guy, retired engineer, lived alone, still drove himself to the clinic, still read the Wall Street Journal every morning with his black coffee. When he sat across from me during our first appointment, he said something I'll never forget. Doc, he leaned forward and said, I just figured I didn't need that part of life anymore. I don't date. My wife passed, so what's the point? He was talking about sex, or more precisely, he was talking about not having it. What he didn't realize, and what most men don't, is that his body didn't agree with that decision. Because just 2 months after he retired that part of his life, he started getting up 4 or 5 times a night to pee. No pain, no infection, just that maddening, constant urge. A bladder that always felt full, a stream that got slower and weaker, like something was backing up inside. And in a way, it was. You see, the prostate isn't just a static little gland sitting quietly in the background. It's an active, living organ. It expands, contracts, produces fluid, and yes, it needs regular release to stay healthy. When a man stops ejaculating regularly, whether through sex or masturbation, something subtle but dangerous starts happening. That fluid builds up. That tissue becomes stagnant. Inflammation creeps in. And before long, that neglected prostate starts pressing on everything around it. Your bladder, your urethra, your sense of control. It's not just inconvenient. It's a warning. Almost half of men over 60 develop benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH. And one of the most overlooked risk factors? Lack of release. Let that sink in for a moment. Regular ejaculation is like flushing the engine. It clears out old fluid, improves circulation, and keeps the prostate from swelling. It's not about fantasy. It's about function. That same man, the one who thought he didn't need that part of life, he ended up needing surgery, a scope and a catheter just to get relief. And he said to me afterward, "Doc, if I'd known that one small habit could have prevented all this, I never would have stopped." And that right there is the lesson. We're told, as we age, to downsize our lives, to accept discomfort, to silence needs we no longer think are appropriate. But the body doesn't care how old you are. The body cares whether it's being used or ignored. You're not weak because you still feel desire. You're wise when you listen to what that desire is trying to tell you. And it's not just about nighttime trips to the bathroom. When your prostate starts failing, you don't just lose your sleep. You start losing your freedom. You skip long car rides because you're afraid of being too far from a restroom. You cancel social plans because your bladder controls your day. You lose independence, and you don't even realize it's happening. That's the real risk. Not just surgery, not just inconvenience, but isolation, fear, the quiet shrinking of a life that was once bold and mobile and free. And what's even more tragic is that it didn't have to happen. So if you've let go of this part of your life, if you've chalked it up as unnecessary, childish, or shameful, I invite you to reconsider. Because in this one small, private, personal act, there may be more power than you ever knew. Now, the prostate is just the beginning, because what starts in your lower body doesn't stay there. Let's take a look at what happens when that same silent disconnection begins to fog up your mind in ways that are harder to see, but far more dangerous to ignore. I feel like my body's foundation is crumbling. Not all at once, just slowly falling apart. That's what a 70-year-old retired firefighter told me. A strong man, lifelong athlete, used to running into burning buildings. But now he could barely stand for 20 minutes without lower back pain. He struggled with hip discomfort. And more recently, he'd started leaking a little urine when he sneezed or laughed. That man wasn't weak. He wasn't lazy. He was just missing a piece of the puzzle that almost no one talks about: the pelvic floor. Now, if you're hearing that term for the first time, don't worry, you're not alone. Most men don't even know they have one. But the truth is, your pelvic floor is the silent support system of your entire lower body. It's a group of muscles that sit at the base of your core, holding up your bladder, your bowel, and your sexual organs. When it's strong, you feel stable, controlled, confident. When it weakens, everything gets harder: movement, urination, intimacy, and even your balance. And here's where it connects to something we've been talking about this whole time: masturbation. And any form of sexual arousal actively engages the pelvic floor. During climax, those muscles contract rhythmically. That's not just a byproduct, it's exercise. Real targeted movement that keeps those muscles alive, responsive, and strong. But when that stimulation stops, the muscles begin to go quiet. Then they begin to deteriorate. It's like any other muscle in your body: use it or lose it. When your pelvic floor fades, here's what can follow: more frequent urges to urinate, difficulty holding gas or urine, leaking when you cough or laugh, lower back pain or hip instability, and in some men, erectile dysfunction. I've had patients avoid weddings and flights because they didn't trust their bladder. I've seen once social men become isolated, not because of fear of people, but because of fear of losing control in public. And you know what breaks my heart? They think it's just aging, but it's not. It's preventable neglect, the slow collapse of a system that needs stimulation to stay alive. So, if any of this sounds familiar, drop a 1 in the comments. If it doesn't yet,
but you're listening and learning, drop a 0 so I know you're still with me. So, what can you actually do? Here's the good news. You don't need surgery. You don't need a gym. You don't even need to leave your chair. All you need is consistency. Start with gentle Kegel exercises. While seated, contract the muscles you'd use to stop urinating midstream. Hold for 5 seconds, release. Repeat 10 times, twice a day. Do this for a week and you'll start feeling that connection again. Now here's where it gets powerful. Combine that with intentional self-stimulation, not to fantasize, but to activate, to send blood flow, to reawaken sensation, to remind your nerves and muscles that this part of you still matters. Because it does. You do. I know this isn't easy to talk about. No one teaches us this. Most of us were taught to ignore, repress, or age out of our bodies. But I want to tell you something important. Something I've told hundreds of men who sat across from me with the same confusion in their eyes. Your body hasn't given up on you, and you don't have to give up on it either. You can rebuild the foundation. You can regain control. You can walk, move, love, and live without shame or fear. Now here's what's even more surprising. Because the collapse of the pelvic floor isn't the final consequence. There's another layer, one that goes far deeper into the very systems that protect you from illness and help you heal. What if I told you that not touching yourself for months or years might be quietly weakening your immune system? Let's talk about that next.
He came into my office wearing a scarf in mid-spring. "I don't get it, Doc," he said. "Every little cold knocks me out for a week now. I used to bounce back in 2 days." He wasn't wrong. His immune system used to be sharp, resilient. But now, even the tiniest bug sent him straight to bed. Coughing, sweating, fatigue. We went through the usual checklist. Diet? Decent. Sleep? Okay. Exercise? A little less than before, but not terrible. Then I asked something he wasn't expecting. "When was the last time you touched yourself in that way?" He looked up surprised. Then he gave a nervous laugh. "It's been a while, Doc. Years, maybe. I just thought that part of my life was done." But the truth is, that part of his life might have been the exact thing his immune system had been waiting for. Because here's what most people don't know. Sexual release isn't just emotional, it's immunological. When you reach orgasm, your body floods itself with a chemical cocktail that doesn't just feel good, it literally strengthens you. One of the most important ingredients in that mix is immunoglobulin A, or IgA for short. This is one of your body's first lines of defense against viruses, bacteria, and pathogens. It protects your mouth, your throat, your gut, your lungs. And when you're sexually active, even with yourself, your IgA levels go up. Your immune system sharpens, your inflammation lowers, and your stress hormones like cortisol drop dramatically. This isn't just theory. A 1999 study from Wilkes University showed that students who had sex 1 to 2 times per week had significantly higher IgA levels than those who didn't. Now think about this for a second. If something so simple, so natural, so private can help boost your immunity, what happens when you remove it from your life completely? Your defenses weaken, your recovery slows, your body starts working against you instead of with you. If you've ever noticed you're getting sick more often or taking longer to bounce back, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, but you're learning something valuable today, drop a 0 so I know you're still here. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying self-stimulation is the cure for all illnesses, but I am saying it's one of your most overlooked drug-free immune boosters, especially in your later years when your body needs all the support it can get. Think of it this way. Every time you engage in self-pleasure, you're sending a message to yourselves, we're still here, we still care, stay strong. Your circulation improves, your white blood cells activate, your hormones rebalance, your brain calms down.
And when you make that a part of your regular routine, not out of fantasy, but out of care, you're not indulging, you're investing. You're reminding your body that it's alive, capable, and worthy of protection. I know for some of you, this may feel awkward to hear, especially if you were taught that sex after 60 is taboo, inappropriate, or unnecessary. But biology doesn't listen to shame. It listens to signals. And the signal you send every time you reconnect with your body is this: I still want to live well. So here's a simple suggestion you can start today. Once or twice a week, set aside 10 to 15 minutes for intentional self-touch. Not in a rush, not in guilt, but in peace. Let your body breathe. Let your chemistry reset. Treat it like a wellness practice, not a secret habit. And just like that, you may start noticing changes. More energy, fewer sniffles, faster healing, and even brighter eyes in the mirror. Because when you support your immune system from the inside out, everything begins to shift. But this story doesn't end with the body. There's one more layer we haven't touched yet. Because while your blood might be healing, your bones might be stronger, your bladder more stable, there's something even deeper at stake. What happens to your identity, your very sense of self, when you stop touching the body you live in? Let's talk about the final, most personal loss of all, and how to take it back.
I don't feel like I live in this body anymore, he said softly. I just live inside it. That was the moment I knew something deeper was going on. He was 77, a former school principal, confident, sharp, the kind of man who used to walk into a room and command it without raising his voice. But on that day, his shoulders were slouched. His tone was flat. And when I asked him what he meant, he said, I don't look in the mirror much these days. I don't see me. And maybe you know that feeling too. The one where you stop checking your reflection. You stop picking out clothes that make you feel good. You stop fixing your hair or moisturizing your skin or standing tall. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because somewhere along the way, you started to feel like your body no longer belongs to you. It happens quietly, gradually, and often it begins when you stop touching it. You see, self-touch isn't just about pleasure, it's about presence. It's how your nervous system reminds itself, I'm alive. I still matter. When you gently reconnect with your own body, you send powerful messages to your brain. I still deserve attention. I'm still worth caring for. I haven't disappeared. But when that connection breaks, when you stop looking, stop touching, stop engaging, you begin to drift. Not just emotionally, but existentially. One woman told me, after menopause, I stopped touching myself. I stopped feeling like a woman, and the more I avoided it, the more I vanished. That word, vanished, it struck me because I've heard versions of it over and over again from men and women alike. I faded, I stopped showing up, I went invisible even to myself. This isn't vanity. This is identity. When we lose the practice of physical presence, we start to lose emotional ownership. And when ownership fades, so does motivation. You eat what's easy, not what's nourishing. You stay in bed a little longer. You stop calling friends. You stop dressing for yourself. And eventually, you stop showing up for your own life. If any of this feels familiar, drop a 1 in the comments. If you're still with me, listening, absorbing, drop a 0 so I know you haven't disappeared. Here's what I want you to remember. You are not just a body waiting to break down. You are not a vessel past its prime. You are still here, and you still belong here fully. Reclaiming that feeling starts small. Here's one thing you can do today. Go into the bathroom, stand in front of the mirror,
And instead of judging what you see, place a hand on your chest, or your arm, or your stomach. Breathe. Say, out loud or silently, I'm still here. It may feel strange, awkward, even emotional, but that's okay, because the road back to yourself often starts with just one hand, one breath, one small gesture of attention. And over time, you might find you want to take better care of that face in the mirror. You start walking straighter, eating better, caring again, not out of ego, but out of recognition. This is you, and you are worth seeing, even now, especially now, because there's one final piece of this journey we haven't explored yet. You've heard how disconnection can affect your sleep, your mind, your mood, your strength, your immunity, but there's one more thing at risk: your entire relationship with the body you live in, the way you treat it, the way it treats you back, and whether you see it as a burden or as your most faithful companion. Let's bring it all together and talk about how self-intimacy isn't about fantasy or indulgence. It's about coming home to yourself.
You don't need anyone else. You don't need a partner. You don't need youth. You don't even need perfect health. What you need is permission, your own permission, to come back to life. Let me say it again, because I know it may feel strange to hear. You have the right to feel good inside your body at any age. And not just feel okay, but to feel connected, whole, present, human. I've had patients in their 60s, 70s, even late 80s tell me, I thought that part of my life was over. And every time I ask them, who told you that? Silence. Because no one actually said it, they just assumed it. Because that's what society does. It whispers that aging means shrinking, fading, withdrawing. But what if it didn't? What if aging was simply a new invitation to slow down, to listen deeper, to reconnect? Because here's the truth. Your body still responds. Your brain still wants chemistry. Your immune system still needs support. Your hormones still want balance. Your emotions still crave release. And yes, your heart still wants to feel like you belong in your own skin. So, how do you start? It doesn't take much. Not equipment, not rituals, not rules. It starts with curiosity. Tonight, find 10 quiet minutes. Sit in a comfortable space. Place your hands on your chest or your stomach. Breathe deeply. And ask yourself, not with judgment, but with compassion, what part of me have I been ignoring? Then, take the next small step. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove anything. You're not doing this for anyone else. This is for you. To reawaken sensation, to feel warmth in your limbs, to bring blood and breath back into places that have felt cold and quiet. You might notice emotions come up, memories, tension, even tears. Let them come. Because sometimes reconnecting with the body is how the soul begins to speak again. And no, you're not being silly. You're not being inappropriate. You're being alive. So, if this message resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If you're still uncertain, still reflecting, drop a 0. Because wherever you are, I honor your process. Now, here's the most powerful part. You don't have to do it all at once. Start with once a week, then maybe twice. Then maybe, just maybe,
It becomes something you look forward to, not out of habit, but out of care. And over time, you'll begin to notice you sleep better, you feel more grounded, you speak with more confidence, you walk with a little more strength, and you begin to look at the man in the mirror and think, he's still here. He still matters. That is not a luxury. That is dignity. That is power. That is you reclaiming what was never lost, only forgotten. So no matter how many years it's been, no matter how disconnected you've felt, no matter how far you think you've drifted, there is still a road back to yourself, and you can take it quietly, privately, gently, because you deserve to feel connected, to feel human, to feel like yourself again. And it all begins with the most courageous, most healing, most personal act of all, touching your own life on purpose. If this video helped you see yourself in a new way, share it with someone you care about. You never know who might be silently waiting for permission to feel alive again.